President Trump says his administration is making America the best place in the world to do business. The White House has pushed through tax cuts, deregulation, and secured trillions of dollars of investments in the United States. The president says his tariff agenda will spark a manufacturing boom.
I say it's the golden age of America. When these factories and plants open up by the thousands, they're coming from Germany, they're coming from Japan, they're coming from Canada. Many factories are coming in because they don't want to pay tariffs. We have an age that's coming up, the likes of which I don't think this country has never seen.
Okay, so we were talking about in the last hour some of the things that we're expecting next year: growth, the big beautiful law, AI to continue to prosper and hold the market up. So it seems like the runway has been set for a pretty good year. The tariff issue has been a sticky one. The inflation never materialized. That the Democrats and somebody like Jerome Powell were saying the inflation's coming, not quite to the extent that they were hoping that it would come. In fact, some are saying that they expect to see inflation go down, and Powell's biggest problem right now is the labor market. But we're still waiting on the Supreme Court to decide on this issue, whether constitutionally he was allowed to do what he did with IEEPA or not. We know that he's got a second route to go if he doesn't get the ruling from the Supreme Court, but that it takes longer. Long story short, I think businesses and markets just want certainty on this issue, and it's sort of got to be put to bed somehow.
It really should. And look, the Supreme Court, we hope, will come up with a solution or an answer on this, a ruling on this soon. It could be tomorrow, but they could wait all the way until end of June. This could drag on for 6 months. I hope that they don't do that. I hope they have the sense to know that we need an answer one way or the other. But who knows when that could happen. As far as the tax cuts go, we're all looking for the one big, beautiful tax cut to kick in. I was under the impression when it passed that it was going to be effective immediately or effective to January 20th when President Trump was sworn in, or even January 1st, beginning of this year. It seems like most of the benefit will come in January 1 of next year. So we're waiting for most of that to kick in. And that may explain why this economy is a bit sluggish, is that people are waiting for the tax cuts.
It would come in January 1 next year, but it would be retroactive because they signed that bill July 4th.
Correct.
It would be retroactive until the beginning of last year.
Right, it might do that, but that still means the benefit will kick in next year.
Correct.
People wouldn't be enjoying it quite yet. So anyway, that may explain why things are slower than we'd like. You know, if you hear that there's a sale, you know, at a shoe store next week, you're going to go next week, you're not going to go today. So I think similarly, people may be delaying economic activity until 2026 rather than doing 2025. Maybe that's why we're not seeing the labor market quite the way we want. Growth is there, but I don't think it's anywhere as robust as people would like to see.
Okay, and what he's talking about in that soundbite, Brian, is people, companies moving production from overseas, bringing manufacturing facilities onshore because they don't want to pay the tariffs, and because in the big beautiful law, they're incentivized tax-wise to manufacture here. And so it makes a lot of sense for companies. That takes a while to kick in, though, before they can set up shop and actually run a manufacturing facility. So, you know, he's painting a very rosy picture. This is his policy. I'm not saying he's right or wrong. I think there are a lot of great things that he's done that will kick in next year. But is this tariff piece of it, being accurately portrayed?
Well, the cause is tough to figure out, okay? I actually think it's the big, beautiful bill that's done more. So on this tax stuff, the business taxes, the enhanced deductions for business investment actually were retroactive in the bill. And what's been interesting, so you talk about a sluggish economy, maybe on the hiring side, yes, but not on the growth side. I mean, it's been 3-4% over the past couple quarters now, and it looks like that may be the case to some degree going forward. So you got a lot of growth, and if you look at GDP over the last couple quarters, usually business fixed investments about 15% of GDP. It's been running at 25%.
Whoa.
Okay.
Dramatic.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I do think you are getting this investment boom. Now, is it coming from the trillions of overseas investment? I don't know the answer to that. But you are getting a ton of investment. It's a bigger part of our GDP, which is good. It hasn't translated into jobs yet, but I do think it sets up pretty well for 2026. When you add that into what I think the consumer might be able to do next year when individual income tax, after-tax earnings go up. So, is it what does he say, 21 trillion of overseas investment? I don't know about that number. But I do think it's very possible 2026 could be the boomy kind of year he's talking about. The question is, politically, does that come in time? And
Right.
do people get that message soon enough to say we want to stick with what the president's doing or bring Democrats back in the House?
Well, speaking of time, I don't think that anybody was really could anticipate that the Supreme Court was going to take this issue up, that IEPA was going to be challenged in the way that it was. So when the president comes out and unveils his whole tariff plan, some companies do shift and decide we're going to take advantage of that and we're going to come onshore manufacturing in the United States. In other words, they wouldn't wait to see if the tariffs were struck down because they wouldn't know. So does that, even if the tariffs are struck down, is that enough that really it was in some ways, Dagan, a win for him?
It's not a win, whether you like the tariffs or not. It's not a win if the Supreme Court strikes these down fiscally because of where we are in terms of borrowing. The U.S. needs this money. So far in the first, I think, 11, it's about $250 billion in tariff revenue so far this year. And the president talks about tariffs as if it's some money pouring out of a magic money machine. that it's gonna cover everything. And so far we have a farmer bailout, borrowed money. $1,000 baby checks, borrowed money. We're gonna be mailing people checks next year from the tariff revenue.
Right.
That would be borrowed money. So all of this money is actually inflationary. We're borrowing more money. And let's talk about the Obamacare super subsidy extensions, because we know, based on Congress being feckless and loserly, and I do mean the right and the left and the middle, they will extend those super subsidies, and that is pure inflation. That is pure subsidy. That gives people, rich families who don't need this money to go out and eat and go on trips. And that's also borrowed money. So all of that is, and you can argue what, inflation is a monetary issue and not a fiscal one. Well, the more we borrow as a nation, the more stimulus you get from in terms of monetary policy, and you see the new bond buying that's going on the Federal Reserve side. So they're inextricably linked at this point. So I think that it's going to be bad for longer term interest rates if and when the Supreme Court, if they rule that these tariffs aren't constitutional.
So then do you think if that plays out the way Dagan described, Taylor, that part of the reason the president is hammering these low interest rates, Jerome Powell, he's going to put his own Fed chair in, and the expectation is that rates will come down substantially. Is he trying to equalize somehow there?
Did you see what Kevin Hassett said? That
Yes.
that the president has a good view, opinion, awareness about where interest rates would be, but ultimately, if it were him, he would be independent and decide on his own where interest rates would be. I just thought that was fun, and I'll just throw that in there.
He also, didn't he kind of fall down into like second place in that Fed rankings?
Bye-bye,
I don't know if those two are tied together.
I think
But-
he's trying not to freak out the bond market.
Well, I agree with that, yeah.
So to answer your question, Jackie, one note I read that I loved is next year for the economy, it's going to be more dessert than veggies because of all the liquidity that we've talked about. Dessert being actually a good thing, not the maha thing where I'd prefer veggies. After a brief window of weakness and growth, we will see more dessert versus vegetables in terms of economic policy, which will lead to an acceleration of growth. Tariff policy uncertainty will fade, and the positive effects from the BBB will start to work their way through the economy. So that certainly is one view. You started this segment talking about tariffs, and I think giving ourselves now almost a year of reflection or looking back as we sort of a year ago thought the tariffs would come and in what form. We think about what we put this economy through. And I think a lot of people at this point would maybe agree that we wanted the high precision manufacturing. When he talks about this manufacturing boom, I'll never forget that quote that I've shared on TV often where someone came up to me and said, I can't believe you blew up your economy because you wanted to build like a microwave in this country. That wasn't the point. A lot of for people, the point was a big semiconductor fab or a high precision robotic manufacturing. It wasn't to build Nike sneakers or cheap socks, right? And so I think the market has had time to sift through the difference in that, where it wasn't always a $5,000 iPhone because we needed to be made in America. It was what high robotic semiconductor fab, right, or whatever. And so I think that is the tariff policy that people are working their ways through. And I think people can get on board with that, especially in middle America when they've seen many of their towns become manufacturing deserts and there aren't good jobs. How do you differentiate between that versus originally on April when we thought it was like to make socks, right? And no one really knew the plan. And so I think the market has had time to digest the difference in that.
Yeah, and there's a national security undertone to what you're talking about, too. So I do think the president is considering those things. We'll have more time to talk about it.